Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. My name's Brian, and we talk about Blu-rays here. And I am honored to have a gentleman with me that I'm a big fan of, and I'm a big fan of both the companies he works for. His name is David Marriott. Hello, David.
Hey man, thanks for having me on.
It is my pleasure to have you, sir. Let's talk about what you do. You are a man who's very busy, and you're working behind the scenes on a couple different labels. And I think some people maybe don't necessarily know that because they associate you with one and not both, or maybe they know, but I know there are probably some that don't. So what are the two places you currently deal with, and how did you come to work for them?
Sure. So yeah, I'm a part of two companies. The first one is called Arbelos Films, and we've been around since about 2017. And that's a company that I do with my business partner there, A Toshinari. And then as of 2 years ago, A and I and a third person, a dear friend and a great film brain named John Doyle, based in Toronto, decided to launch a sister company called Canadian International Pictures that would focus, as the title sort of implies, on Canadian cinema sort of broadly from the 60s to the 80s.
Very nice. Yeah, both great labels, and I think people that watch this channel, listen to the show, are aware of both because I try to promote both. Certainly, Canadian International Pictures gets a little bit more press through the Vinegar Syndrome machine, and you guys have been doing great work on both sides, both labels for a long time. So my hat's off to you. But
Appreciate it.
how do you come to be involved with Arbelos first, and then Canadian International second?
Sure. So Arbelos was born out of actually a whole other company called Cinelicious, which was a post-production house in Los Angeles that launched a distribution division called Cinelicious Picks. That's sort of in like the 2014 to 2017 corridor. We were active for about 3 years and were sort of instrumental in helping build more of like the distribution division. And in those days, we were doing a split slate. So we were doing first run stuff like new art house movies, and then 2 and 4K restorations of sort of older legacy titles that we thought had fallen off the grid for whatever reason and that were worthy of a larger audience and that we think had that sort of potential. And so yeah, we did that company for about 3 years, and then we decided that we sort of wanted some ownership over what we were doing. So we spun that off into Arbelos, and that sort of just continued on that trajectory. It was different in as much as I think we learned that we liked doing the older movies more. I mean, we love doing the first run stuff as well, but there was something about that pace. You're sort of at the festival, and then off the back of that, you're into the theatrical, and everything is sort of, you're trying to keep that sort of flame alive. Whereas with the restoration titles, even though we sort of almost treat them like new films, because oftentimes there's not a ton of awareness yet around them. If we do our job right, there is down the line. But yeah, it was a little less hurried, and we could sort of articulate what we wanted to do with them a little bit more. And I think it was just more to our temperament. And so we launched Arbelos. Our first movie was the last movie, Dennis Hopper's ill-fated, but I think super masterful follow-up to Easy Rider that eventually got him blacklisted from Hollywood all the way through to his comeback with Out of the Blue. Yeah, and that was sort of our first bigger high-profile title, or not
Great,
high-profile, it was our first title, yeah.
great release, by the way. Really great release.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're really proud of that. We put a lot into it. And then, yeah, so we've worked on a bunch of other films, sort of like through Arbelos. We put out The Juniper Tree, which is a great sort of folk horror film. That was a folk genre film that is Bjork's first leading role in a film. We still service the Arbelos, or the Cinelicious rather, catalog. So that's titles like Funeral Parade of Roses is maybe one of the biggest ones that's actually a perfect example of what we're sort of trying to do, is to take a
Also,
film that, sorry.
no, I was gonna say also a great release.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of all the Arbelos discs. You guys always do wonderful. The restorations are incredible. The extras are excellent. I feel like Arbelos doesn't get quite the same press as Canadian International does, and that's unfortunate. But I one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is to talk about it because you guys are doing great. Continue with the titles because I really think it's neat for people to realize, like, in case they didn't, the stuff that Arbelos has been doing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so Funeral Parade of Roses, well, that's kind of like has come over with the Cinelicious titles. We've invested in, I think, our biggest one, and it's interesting because Arbelos, really what we're trying to do is find films that we think are canonical, but are for whatever reason not part of the canon yet. Funeral Parade is a great example of that, where there was very little awareness in the States. We've restored it in 4K, put it out on a theatrical tour, did a special edition Blu-ray, got it up on TCM, like got it out as many places as we could. And sort of every year it's finding a bigger and bigger audience. And now it's sort of understood to be this sort of underground queer classic, which, it was always that film, it was always that good. But our function, success for us is to get it to that place where it's now thought of in that way. And so something like Satan Tango, which is maybe one of our more recognizable titles through Arbelos, because Bellatar is already a super established, iconic art house director. But the thing with Satan Tango is that it's 7.5 hours long, and you have to be crazy to restore that in 4K. It's a huge, very risky kind of gambit, and nobody else was really doing it. And so that's something where it's like, okay, that's already canonical, but nobody could see it. The prints were in poor shape. It was super expensive to bring them to the States to show them when there were prints. So by restoring it in 4K, putting it on a DCP, putting it on a special edition Blu-ray, all of a sudden everyone can see this masterpiece. So it's one thing to know it's there. It's another thing to actually be able to see it properly.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine the number of reels that a 7-hour film would have in terms of transporting the film if you wanted to try and run it before that.
It was wild. At some point, a couple of years ago, Bella was looking to raise some money for like a student organization that was trying to branch off from like one of the government schools that under the current administration was going a little sideways, and he wanted to get behind these sort of, liberal students trying to do their own thing for the right reason. So he auctioned off like an exhibition print that he had, the work print of Satan Tango. And so we helped him promote it, and the photo was like, I should have counted it, but it was an absurd amount of reels. Like, it's terrifying to look at.
Very nice, very nice. Any other Arbelos titles before we, maybe it makes more sense to do Arbelos then Canadian, so we can go into your latest Arbelos release. But if you have any others you want to talk about before we get into that one.
Sure. Yeah. We sort of ended up sort of intentionally, sort of unintentionally. It's really just, there's a company in Canada called Films We Like. And if that name wasn't taken, that could be the mandate for Arbelos, like it's, I think everything hangs together, and there is a sort of curatorial identity to it. But also, the fact that we sort of subspecialized in Hungarian films is really just because we love those films. It wasn't like a super thought out, deliberate process. But yeah, so we have Satan Tango, and then we have Damnation, which is another Bellatar film that he made actually before Satan Tango. And then we put out Son of the White Mare, which is sort of an amazing psychedelic Hungarian animated film.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, we're really that one is an eyeful in the best possible way. And that's a Marcel Jankovic film from '81. We also released his earlier film as well that came on that set, a film called Janos Vitez, or often known by Johnny Corncob in the United States, which is a really iconic Hungarian feature-length animated film that preceded Son of the White Mare, a little more in the sort of Yellow Submarine style of animation, whereas when you get to Son of the White Mare, it's going off into all these sort of like amazing different directions visually. But both those films are really fantastic. We are working on all of Nina Menke's narrative films. A lot of people are talking about her now because she made a documentary called Brainwashed, Sex Camera Power, that did a big international tour, and Kino put out theatrically. And it kind of references her earlier narrative work. And we have just put out a box set of 6 of her films, all in new restorations.
Very nice. Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's move on to the newest one. This is Chameleon Street. I've got the wonderful limited edition slipcase you guys sent, and it's beautiful. Has some really nice stuff inside too. But let's talk about Chameleon Street. What is it, and how do you describe it when people ask you about it?
When people ask me about it, I describe it as one of the great previously lost masterpieces of independent American cinema. I think it's that good, and it was really nice to see recently Richard Brody in the New Yorker did a big list of it was called the greatest independent films of the 20th century, and Chameleon Street was listed, and I think that's very appropriate.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's a film that won the grand jury prize at Sundance when it was first premiering at festivals, and had a lot of attention around it and a lot of potential. And then there was just a huge cluster around the distribution, which is a whole separate thing that I almost feel like that's more Wendell's story to tell than mine. But for many reasons, the film did not get its due when it was first released, which is criminal when you see it, because it is really that good. It's biting social commentary that has only become more relevant with the passage of years. It is whip smart, like ferociously smart, and it's definitely one of the funniest films of the 90s, I would say. I think it's hilarious. Definitely one of the funniest films Arbelos has done, but I feel like that's not really saying much, because people don't really get a lot of chuckles necessarily out of. Actually, that's not true. There's a lot of laughs in Satan Tango, but you don't associate Bellatar with comedy.
Yeah, definitely not. No, of course you're talking about Wendell B. Harris Jr., the writer, director, star extraordinaire of the film. He plays Douglas Street, who is a real guy that was a real con artist, as I understand.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so Chameleon Street follows a section in the middle of Doug Street's life. And so during the film, Wendell playing Doug Street essentially impersonates his way up the social ladder. He starts by impersonating a reporter for Time magazine, and that leads to him impersonating a surgeon, which leads to him impersonating an Ivy League student, which leads to him impersonating a corporate lawyer until he's sort of eventually busted at the end of the film. But yeah, that's all true. That's a real guy who, you know, if you actually look into his life, continues on the path of high level daring impersonations like well into the aughts. But yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a fascinating dude. And there is a little bit of a like about 6 minutes of an archival interview that Wendell did with him. I think he's in prison at the time. Am I misunderstanding?
He is in prison. I'm forgetting now what he was in prison for. So yeah, leading up to the period where the film picks up rather, the real life Doug Street also had many adventures that had led him to certain places in his life. But yeah, there is a bit of an archival interview. I wish we had more because he's a super fascinating guy, really, really captivating in only sort of the 6 minutes that we have.
Oh yeah.
Clearly like a super intelligent person, as is Wendell. Like I almost wish there was a camera on Wendell who's conducting this archival interview as sort of pre-research for Chameleon Street, and just to have cameras on both of them sort of like sizing each other up and sort of doing this dance around each other would have been interesting. But yeah, the Doug Street footage is great. I'm glad we were
Yeah.
able to include it.
No, I'm so glad you are. It's just neat to see him and hear Wendell's voice. Wendell's got a great voice, by the way, just
Oh
an
my God.
incredibly powerful, deep, authoritative, but that makes, him funnier in a way. I don't know, that everything about it is just he's an incredible presence, that guy.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Triple threat, as you mentioned, director, writer, actor. And, the big question that we get after people see this film after, oh my God, I love this film, is why is Wendell not in every movie after this?
He's
And
only
so,
in like Soderbergh picked him up for Out of Sight. He's got a little bit in that, and there's a
yeah.
couple others, but not a lot, right?
Yeah.
What's
He's in
do you,
Out of Sight. He's in Road Trip, the Tom Green movie. He's in, I think he might have done a TV thing. But yeah, his biggest thing outside of Chameleon Street is Out of Sight. And he's great in that because
he
people
is.
know what Out of Sight is, but it's all these either movie stars or like venerable character actors. And then Wendell, who seems like he's beamed in from another planet in the best possible way. Like, I don't think anybody can keep up with him because he's Wendell B. Harris Jr.
No, he's great.
Utterly
And
singular talent.
your appreciation for that scene, he's only got, I think, one scene in Out of Sight, but your appreciation for him, the movie, that scene goes up once you see Chameleon Street because you're just like, oh my gosh, here he is. But obviously, I'm really pleased that Soderbergh must have been a huge fan of this film, which is not a surprise. The man has a good taste.
Yeah, he was on the jury that gave
There you
Chameleon Street
go.
the award at Sundance and has always been a huge advocate for the film and for Wendell as a talent.
That totally makes sense. Very cool. I was listening to, you got a lot of nice features on here. There's a new commentary with Wendell B. Harris Jr. and Ashley Clark, who now works at Criterion and Criterion Channel.
Yep.
And it's a great interview. And there's one thing that I wanted to ask. It's a silly question, but it's just an aside. Because I think Wendell says at one point some of the strongest reactions he got to the film were from the women who Doug Street really operated on, which really happened, and how offended they are, rightfully so, that this guy is being championed in the way. I get why they're upset. I totally do.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, what in terms of the operations, like, were they injured? Do we know anything about how much damage he did during these operations? I'm just very curious, and I couldn't find any information on it.
Yeah, my understanding, and it's all you know, through Wendell, or there's actually we couldn't include it on the set just because of licensing fees. But Doug Street and Wendell are on an episode of Geraldo in 1991 promoting the film in a
What?
special on con men.
Oh my
So
God.
it's the two of them, and then I think there's like three other panelists who are all noted con artists in various ways. And so I understand it from that because they get into it, and then also in talking to Wendell. But yeah, my understanding is that the real Doug Street performed multiple hysterectomies
Oh my God.
successfully.
Oh, so he actually pulled it off. That's
My
insane.
understanding is that he pulled it off. I
That's
think that
insane.
the anger and the lawsuits obviously were people retroactively realizing that he is in no way a doctor and
Yeah,
being rightfully furious. But again, that's anecdotal. But my understanding is that he was successful.
that's crazy. Because I was curious about it. Because in the movie, it's hard to tell. he's doing the surgery. You've got another doctor in the room. Also, it's crazy that he was brought into the establishment doing these surgeries and no doctor at any point stopped him from. So either there's a great scene where he runs in a bathroom. He's looking like in a medical text. And I'm like, oh my God, is he studying how to do a hysterectomy now? That's insane. Or whatever. And so like, he obviously figured it out, but it's crazy that no doctor in an operating procedure ever stopped him. So he must have at least had some idea what he was. That alone is just crazy to me. Mind blowing. Is that Geraldo episode on YouTube somewhere? People could find it. I'm just curious.
No, I was able to see it through an old VHS that Wendell had.
Okay.
Well, and still has, but I don't believe it's online.
Bummer. That's too bad. Wow, that sounds fascinating. That sounds like amazing stuff. But I totally get why that'd be a difficult thing to license for sure. But not to say that there's not enough stuff on here already. You know, you've got that commentary, you've got more interviews with Wendell and yeah, it's a beautiful package, and the new 4K restoration from the 35 camera negative looks great. You know, I'm the last time I remember even attempting to watch this movie, because I did work at a video store in the 90s and we had the VHS and I tried to watch it then, and the me of the 1990s sadly was not responsive to it for whatever stupid reason. I don't get that now, but I just remember my response at the time was lukewarm, and I don't know if I finished it. That guy's an idiot. That 90s me is a moron. And so I can't stress enough how enjoyable this movie is and how big a deal it is that you guys are putting this out. You know, it's just really a victory in a lot of ways for a wonderful gem of independent cinema. Also, I love the I don't even know what you call this, paper doll kind of thing with,
yeah,
with Wendell and with Wendell, Doug Street, and all the outfits that he wears. That's a great touch. And a beautiful slipcase.
Yeah, that's all credit due to A. Tushinari, who's kind of our creative director for Arbelos, and we're really always trying to sort of step it up in terms of what we can do with the limited edition packaging. Like this one as well. I have mine here too, so I can like do this little show and tell. I don't know if you can
do
actually
it.
see it, but
Go for it.
UV light.
Oh, the UV light. Yes. You told me about that.
The secret reveal on the front and on the back.
Which, that's great. Yeah, you told me about it and I was like, dang, I don't have a UV light. I need to get one now to check it out. So yeah, if you do have the limited edition slipcase, which you guys are only selling at the website, right? As far as
that's exclusively limited through the Arbelos website.
Yeah, so that's got the UV light, and it's just you do a beautiful envelope style slipcase, which I don't think anybody else does. I've only seen you guys doing this envelope style as far as I know.
Yeah, we were trying to kind of, complement what's happening in the market, but also do something that was identifiably and specifically Arbelos. So we went with the envelope for everything. We started doing them with Satan Tango, and every release subsequently has had that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, anyway, there's a lot to talk about. We can move on from this, but I highly recommend people check out Communion Street. Great movie. So glad you guys put it out. This is like a really big deal. Like this, if Criterion had done this, there'd be quite the fanfare for it. And I'm saying there should be the same fanfare for you guys putting it out. They just have a little higher profile. That's the only reason. But this is that kind of movie. This is that kind of a victory for us, fans of independent cinema. So big hats off.
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, the reception has actually been really great. Like, we've been really pleased with it. People seem excited about it. The one thing I will bump on that is the commentary with Wendell and Ashley is fantastic. We also did a second commentary where we assembled as best we could different members of the cast and crew. And that's a really fun one because it's you really see how an independent film gets made. You see what a homegrown effort it was, how specific it was to Michigan and to Flint, where everybody was from, and just sort of what the culture was around that time. And Wendell's on it, but like the producer, some of the other cast, Wendell's brother, Hobart Harris, who was one of the producers on the film and is actually a doctor in real life who advised on those medical scenes. There's a lot of gems and nuggets in that, in both commentaries, but in the cast and crew one was a real, it was something to put it together, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot here, and I haven't covered all the extra stuff. It's a great package, plus a booklet, and collectors love booklets with essays, and you've got a nice one here. So it is a really great package, like legit in the top echelon of my favorite releases this year so far in terms of the movie and the extras and the restoration, everything you guys have done. It's big thumbs up. So,
oh, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah, that booklet actually answers the question that I sort of brought up earlier, that a lot of people are wondering what happened Wendell's career as an actor or as a director. Why is there no follow-up? There's a great IndieWire interview that he did during the theatrical release, like supporting that, which sort of gets into those in great detail and talks about his time in Hollywood after Chameleon Street's release and how that all unfolded. So
Very
the
cool.
answer to that question lives in the disc. And it's really cool of Wendell to participate. That's something I want to make special mention of. Like, he was deeply involved in every aspect of the release. He supervised the restoration. He made himself very available to make this set as sort of comprehensive as it ended up being, which we really appreciate.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason I like it so much, is it's clear that he's a big part of it, and he's such a singular dude that the disc would just not be the same without, you know, his involvement in on the level that it is. And that's part of the reason I think it's so great. So again, big thumbs up from me.
Thanks, man.
Let's move on to some Canadian international picture stuff. Let's talk about what's I don't have it yet. So what's the most recent title that you guys have announced?
The most recent title that's up for pre-sale now is a film called Dream Life.
Yeah.
Is the first film directed by a woman in the history of Quebecois cinema, the second in all of Canadian cinema. It's from 1972, directed by a woman named Mireille Dansereau, who's still very active and a real important and interesting figure in Quebecois cinema.
Very cool. What kind of a movie is it? What's the story of it, if you can?
Yeah, it's a lot of different things at once, but at its heart, it's a coming of age story about two young women who meet and form a very deep friendship over the course of a Montreal summer. And it's concerned, I think, principally with that transition from a young fantasy life into more of the hard lessons and the realities of adulthood. But it's very interested in interiority, in dreamscapes. It has this wonderful quality of, you can really tell that Mireille it's her first feature, and she is just in love with the potential of the film medium. So all these different visual ideas, all these different sort of character arcs. She doesn't know what the rules are yet, and so it doesn't abide by any of them in a glorious way. It's a great summer movie. It has a really infectious, sincere, fun energy to it.
Very nice. I apologize, I haven't reviewed the extras. Was the filmmaker involved in the extras and everything?
Yeah, we have two new interviews with Mireille. So the way the set is constructed is there's Dream Life, and then we have her early short work, a sort of comprehensive portrait of that, which is a short film she makes in Quebec, in Montreal, and then she went to the Royal College of Art on a scholarship in London and made one short and one medium length. One's a feature, or one's a narrative, one's a doc, called Compromise, and the longer one is called Forum. So those are all represented. Fun tidbit: she went to school in college, or she went to the college with Tony Scott. So he's actually the DP for the two short films she makes in London.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, and then she came back to Montreal to make Dream Life. So we have sort of a comprehensive interview with her about Dream Life, and then another one about her time in London, her childhood in Quebec, and making sort of the short work leading up to the feature.
Fantastic. No, I'm looking forward to that. That sounds really, really intriguing. A couple that I do have that are related in a way is Gina and Dirty Money. Can you talk about these two films in broad strokes, and basically what, you know, the filmmakers and what the trilogy is and all that stuff?
Yeah, so that's sort of an informal crime trilogy that Denis Arcand makes starting in the early 70s to the mid 70s in Quebec. I think most people know Denis Arcand, especially in the States, for the Decline of the American Empire and the Barbarian Invasions, which are films he makes later in his career. This is really early, so he starts at the National Film Board, where most people sort of get their start, to the CBC or the National Film Board, and then they sort of branch out and make things like this that were more independently produced. But he starts at the Film Board as sort of a social activist documentarian, and then kind of breaks off and jumps right into this trilogy. So it starts with Dirty Money, or La Maudite Galette in French.
Very nice.
Which is, I mean, it's essentially Blood Simple, but 12 years earlier. It's this great sort of proto neo-noir about a heist that goes sideways and these sort of cascading double crosses that surround it. It's very try to think of the right word for it. Like, comedy is not the word, it's a drama, but there is definitely sort of like an acid humor that cuts through it.
Very nice.
It's great way. It's beautifully photographed. It's riffing on a lot of, kind of B films and crime films of like the 40s and 50s. The two leads who are on that cover there. Really happy with how they came about, by the way. That's a painting by Jackson Norton for our set. But that's Maurice Sabourin and Luce Guilbeault, two kind of titans of 70s Quebecois acting, and they're great as sort of the centerpiece of it. But yeah, so that's the first one, sort of a blood simple-ish neo-noir that's fantastic. The second film in the trilogy is called Rejam Padovani, which is forthcoming, just sort of an
Nice.
upstairs, downstairs film about the mob in Montreal and its connections to political officials, which is might even be my favorite of the three. It's
Mm,
all three of them I think are like 5 stars all the way, but that middle one that's forthcoming is my personal favorite. So stay tuned for
excellent.
that one.
Excellent.
And then Gina, which we released first, is actually the third in the trilogy, and that one's insane. That one's very fun to describe because it's at once this explosive exploitation film, and then also it's a film about labor politics in the textile industry in Quebec, and they're happening at the same time.
I love it.
It's this crazy thing. It sounds like it shouldn't work, and it works beautifully. It also has the best snowmobile chase, I think, in the history of cinema.
Oh, I love that that's slightly featured on the cover
Yes,
of
yeah,
this,
exactly.
which is great. Definitely
And
something
that's
I
Celine Lomez on the front. She plays Gina, the titular Gina. Most people would probably know her. She co-stars opposite Elliot Gould in The Silent Partner, but was also in a lot of great
Oh, wow.
Quebecois
Okay. I didn't
films.
put that together. That's amazing. Very, very
Yeah,
cool.
no, she's tremendous. But yeah, those are probably like the high watermark for 70s crime cinema in Canada, and I think they definitely hold their own against some of the major American crime films of the 70s.
Very nice. And very nice to know. I know I'm sure you guys have probably announced it elsewhere, but that second installment is coming. That's exciting for folks that are into trilogies. And I know collectors love to have everything. If there's three films, they want all three films. So that's exciting. The last one I want to touch on is Rainbow Boys. If you wanted to talk about that one. And then I have one more quick question about something that I'm excited about that you guys are doing down the road. So what's
Yeah,
Rainbow Boys?
Rainbow Boys is great. Rainbow Boys is a Gerald Potterton film. Most people would know him for being one of the co-directors of Heavy Metal from 1981. But this is a film starring, you can see them on the front there. That's obviously Donald Pleasance and Don Calfa and Kate Reed from the Andromeda Strain. And it's this sort of mismatched comedy about these three very different people who decide to go on a almost like slapstick excursion into the deep Rocky Mountains to try to find lost gold. It's a wild plot. It was restored by a company in Winnipeg in Canada called Zelko Films. And we saw that they were starting to do a little bit with it theatrically. And so we reached out to them and were able to collaborate on this set. But it's a strange one because I mean, most of the cast obviously more known for sort of genre films, iconic genre films. This is much more of like a going my way sort of a comedy film almost. It's all shot in Lytton, BC, which is an area that doesn't really exist anymore because of the 2021 wildfires. Sort of just like decimated that entire part of British Columbia. So in a weird way, it's also a time capsule of a place that doesn't exist anymore.
Nice.
But yeah, it's really funny. It's beautifully photographed. It's unlike anything else in the catalog, which is a fun thing to be able to do. Like every release is like a little bit different from the thing that came before.
Well, that's one of the things I like about what you guys are doing with CIP is just a wide variety of stuff, and as you said, a lot of it is unknown to US cinephiles and any, like you said, even some Canadian cinephiles. But yeah, definitely to me, there have been few films you guys have released that I was aware of prior to your release. And that's a big deal to me because I'm just like, show me, tell me what is this, and you guys seem to be doing a great job with digging up those gems. And obviously, as I've said, putting together the packages in terms of restorations, extras, and the involvement of filmmakers when you can, all that stuff, really, really high end and high profile in terms of doing the right thing for the release, which I love.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, we put a lot of effort into it. I mean, really sadly, Gerald Potterton, the director, passed away shortly after we finished working on this, but we were lucky to be able to sort of consult with him on the release. We also put out a film called Buster Keaton Rides Again. It's a documentary about the making of The Railrodder, which Gerald Potterton directed. It's one of Buster Keaton's last film things ever. And so we have that film is on the set, but then also a documentary about Gerald Potterton and Buster Keaton making the film. So within the label, we're starting to have some continuity of multiple releases, either directed by or featuring the same either actors or filmmakers, starting to kind of like build that tapestry, which is a nice way, I think, to get people even further educated and indoctrinated to Canadian cinema.
It's wonderful, wonderful approach. Buster Keaton Rides Again, that disc is one of my favorite releases you guys have put out. I think that documentary is just fantastic. I mean, it's so neat to see a genius like Buster Keaton, even at the age he's at, shooting the Railrodder with the ideas he has and even his own grumpy frustrations with sometimes not being able to pull off the gags he wants to pull off, or,
Yeah.
that he disagrees with Potterton about how to stage certain things, like those kind of not fights, but disagreements are incredibly entertaining to watch. And it's just really neat to see. And almost, I compared it to like a Maisels documentary type in terms
Mhm.
of the, you know, fly on the wall approach. You could compare it to somebody else too, but it just has that wonderful feeling of just being in the room with a creative comedic giant, and it's just so delightful. I really love that release a lot.
Yeah, John Doyle, who we do key player in CIP, is compares it to it's Buster Keaton's Don't Look Back, which
That's great. That's
I think
perfect.
is appropriate. It's also wild to
100%.
hear Buster Keaton speak at length. Like
Yeah.
even just that is a total novelty to
Yeah,
me anyway.
especially for if anybody hasn't heard his voice, it's a deep, deep voice, and it's not necessarily what you would think he sounds like. And yeah, hearing him talk at length is just magnificent. It's absolutely mesmerizing. But that's a great release. Yeah. Before I let you go, I should cut this short, but one title that I've been eagerly awaiting is a documentary called Devil at Your Heels. And I don't know if you want to explain what the documentary is and maybe where you guys are at in terms of a potential release, if it's coming, when it might be coming, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so actually when we first launched CIP, I guess 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, Devil at Your Heels is one of the films we mentioned because we thought we would be releasing it imminently. It's an amazing documentary from the early 80s about Ken Carter, who's aka the Canadian Madman, who's sort of like Canada's Evel Knievel, almost like a stunt performer in Canada. And Devil at Your Heels follows his attempt to create essentially a rocket car to jump a huge body of water and the different trials and tribulations of trying to activate that stunt. And then also in so doing is a really wonderful and nuanced portrait of Ken Carter, the man. And so we were going to put that out, and then we got word that the National Film Board, who produced the film, who we licensed it from, were actually going to do a new master. They were, going to rescan the film, clean it up, and so that was very, very exciting news. But we didn't know that when we made the initial announcement. So that sort of is the reason for the delay. But it is 100% coming in 2024.
Oh, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Yeah, I mean, it's truly it's one that my podcast partner, Ellery Kane, turned me on to. I hadn't heard of it until he brought it up on the show for Pure Cinema. And boy, it is one of my favorite things that we've ever talked about on that podcast, because it's just an incredible, like you said, document of a character. I mean, he is a character through and through, and just the trials and tribulations of building the ramp alone. The rocket car is one part, but the ramp is another aspect, and it's just, yeah. I mean, it's up there with the best documentaries of that type. I mean, you can throw things like American Movie in the mix, but it's different than that. But it's like that kind of compelling, that kind of character, that kind of guy that you're just absolutely engaged by and rooting for, and just kind of like curious about on some level, like in terms of what's going through a man's head that wants to do this, like, because that's straight up crazy.
It's funny you mentioned that. The film is almost more about the ramp than the rocket car. You would think rocket car would take top billing, but you're right. Some of the best stuff is about that ramp.
Yeah, I mean, there's some shots of him just like walking the ramp, talking, and he's just great in the way that he talks to camera and kind of projects his inner monologue, that just makes it priceless. So anyway, I cannot wait. I would love to have you back before then, but definitely when you guys put that out, because that's a movie I can't praise enough, and I just absolutely can't wait for that Blu-ray to come out.
No, thanks. Appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun.
No,
And thank you for all the support for the releases.
it's I as I said off mic, I'd like to do more. I really love what you guys are doing at both Arbelos and CIP, and so great appreciation and thanks to all the work that you guys, because it's a very small, like it's like 2 or 3 people we're talking about, and I think that's the other thing when people get excited, if we want to be nice about or up in arms about this or that, about certain releases. just keep in mind, there's not a lot of people working at some of these labels. These are very small, on the ground kind of operations. And, it's a lot of work. And you guys really have outdone yourselves in terms of just doing the releases, but doing them on the scale you're doing them with the amount of staff that you have is pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we all wear a lot of hats, and CIP is starting to restore its own films now, which is a whole other thing, which is super
Oh boy.
exciting, but also adds a big dimension to what we're doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
always growing, always adding more hats. But it's
I
nice to
love
know
it.
that there's people out there who really appreciate it and are supporting it. And that's been super gratifying to see.
Yeah. Well, keep it up the great work, and thank you again so much for coming on. And like I said, I'll have you back on to talk about some more from both labels if you like. It's been great to talk to you, sir.
Total pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching or listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.